Hello, fellow Warhammer 40k players and Imperial Knights players. Welcome back to another video in the series for the new Imperial Knights Codex release of September 2025. In this video, we will be deep diving the Valourstrike Lance Detachment, and I will not be reading the fun text because we have a lot of content to cover. The Detachment rule. It is bold gallantry. Each time an Imperial Knights unit from your army advances, you can re-roll the advance roll, and each time an Imperial Knights unit from your army advances until the end of the turn, range weapons equipped by Imperial Knights models from your army have the Assault ability. For those of you who are new, Assault means advance and shoot. I will be using them interchangeably in my videos. This is very powerful. Movement wins games, and you can advance, reroll the advance roll, and advance and shoot. Amazing. Now, one caveat is that you can action and shoot. If you advance, you cannot action and shoot. You can advance and shoot, or you can action and shoot. But you cannot advance, action, and shoot. Just want to clarify that for people who have just gotten into Imperial Knights. Next, there are enhancements. There are 4 enhancements. And all of these enhancements are given to, as usual, a character, a knight who is a character, but not an epic character like Canis Rex. He cannot take enhancements. So these are for all your Questores except Canis, Cerastus, and Dominus Knights, but not Acastanus Knights because they are not characters. So, when you are giving it to a knight character, all of these enhancements gives that character the ability to use the enhancement ability on a different knight. Every enhancement is like that. So take that into mind when you're considering your strategy. First one is Bearer of the Iron Chalice. Imperial Knights model only. At the end of your movement phase, select one other Imperial Knights model from your army that is within 12 inches of and visible to the bearer. Now, because of the towering rule, which you can look up or see in the core rules, being visible is not that difficult. That selected model regains up to D3 lost wounds or up to 3 lost wounds if your army is honored. I think this is a great enhancement, but there's one caveat. It happens at the end of your movement phase, which means you have to move your knights and plan to use this enhancement ability. Now, this is not a once per game enhancement. You can use this every turn. Now, one difference between this ability and other similar abilities that heal D3 lost wounds is that it happens at the end of your movement phase. So not only does it make this enhancement difficult to use, but you cannot use this in your command phase when you're determining battle shock for determining whether you have 0 OC or full OC or partial OC if you're bracketed. Now, in Questor Forge Pact, you can restore wounds, but it happens in the command phase. And so I have restored wounds to the point where my knight is no longer under half strength or half its wounds, and it doesn't have to roll a battle shock test. So that helps a lot. Now, this happens at the movement phase. It's not that good of an enhancement. Points haven't been released yet, but if it's 15 points, maybe it's worth it. If it's anything more, I probably would rather take a different enhancement. The next one is a really good one. Bearer of the Evanescent Ion. Imperial Knights model only. At the end of your movement phase, select one other Imperial Knights model from your army that is within 12 inches of and visible to the bearer. Until the start of your next movement phase, that selected model has the stealth ability. It's an amazing ability. I think it's a lot better, especially if the enemy is playing properly and focusing fire on one knight. That if you know you're going to push a knight up, you can push a knight up and keep the knight with the enhancement 12 inches behind of it and maybe hidden in a ruin or hidden behind the ruin, and it can buff that knight you just sent out, like a Lancer, for example, such that he has stealth. So the Lancer already has a 4-up invul in ranged and melee, but now it has stealth on top of that, and it just makes whatever knight you choose to send out a lot more durable. It does happen at the end of your movement phase, but unlike the useless healing, this one is actually useful because it lasts until the start of your next movement phase. So when the opponent's turn comes around and he shoots you, you have stealth. Bearer of the Judicant's Helm. Imperial Knights model only. At the start of your shooting phase, select one other Imperial Knights model from your army that is within 12 inches of and visible to the bearer. Until the end of that phase, range weapons equipped by that selected model have the Ignores Cover ability. I think Ignores Cover is an amazing ability, but this detachment does not give you any support for stickying objectives. You can't get Banner of Macarius Triumph like in the Index Noblelands detachment. So, why I mention sticky objectives is that you take an immolator to transport your sisters in. Your sisters have the ability to sticky objectives in your command phase, but the immolator that's transporting them strips cover. If it hits an enemy unit with any of its weapons, at the end of your shooting, you can select one of the enemies hit by one of your weapons. You don't have to do any damage. All you have to do is hit them. Your hunter killer hits on a 2-up, so you can also take flamers. So it's not that hard to strip cover with an immolator. And if you really want to sticky objectives and move your knights out, you might want to bring battle sisters. So sisters and immolator go together. You can already strip cover. This ignores cover ability is not that good. Now, if it's dirt cheap, maybe 10, 15 points, take it if you have the points, but it's definitely not auto include. If it's like freaking unyielding Paragon level, 40 points, garbage. It depends on the points and depends what kind of allies you're bringing. But I love the Sisters Immolator. I love transports. I love that the Sister Battle Squad splits. So you got 5 on your home objective sticking and you send 5 out in the Immolator. I just love that ability. So I think this is a bad enhancement, but you know, the beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Next, Bearer of the Lancer's Sigil. Sigil. Not very good at pronouncing things that are not common, so I think it's pronounced sigil, but I'm not sure. Imperial Knights model only. At the start of your charge phase, select one other Imperial Knights model from your army that is within 12 inches of and visible to the bearer. Until the end of that phase, you can reroll charge rolls made for that selected model. I think it is amazing. It already says Bearer of the Lancer Sigil. And you don't put it on the Lancer unless you're running 2 Lancers. You put it on another knight and then use the ability. You select the Lancer to get reroll charge rolls. So if you're playing a Lancer, if you're playing a Gallon, if you're playing both of them, it's a great enhancement. There are some knights that have some melee, like the Castigator, the Atropos. They have some melee. The Acheron, you're not going to play the Acheron, but if you do, it has melee. But I wouldn't take this enhancement unless you're really, really spec'd into a melee build. Now, we're going to get to the stratagems, and this is going to become clear, but I'm going to give you a sneak preview of strategy and list building. Canis is an auto include in this list because of the stratagems and how they work. And the Lancer works well with Canis because Canis can get a free tank shock with his datasheet ability. Lancer can get a free tank shock with its datasheet ability and can do so if Canis has already used it. So Lancer and Canis go very well together. You're probably going to want to bring 3 big knights. And so Bearer of the Lancer Sigil, if you're taking a Lancer, take it on the other knight that's not Canis. Otherwise, don't take it. All right, so now we're gonna get to the stratagems, and I'm not gonna read that text up there, but I'll put it up here while we go over the first few stratagems, and you can pause the video and read it if you want. The first stratagem is run them through. When fight phase costs 1 CP, up to 3 Imperial Knights models from your army that charge this turn that have not been selected to fight this phase and that are each within 9 inches horizontally of the same point on the battlefield. Effect. Until the end of the phase, melee weapons equipped by your models have the Lance ability. Okay, so it targets up to 3 Imperial Knights models from your army that charge this turn. Okay. They have to be within 9 inches horizontally of the same point on the battlefield. When I get to the maps, this will all become very clear to you from my understanding of what I'm reading. But this 1 CP stratagem gives up to 3 Imperial Knights models. They can be Titanic, they can be Armigers, they can be Questoris, Dominus, Acastus, it doesn't matter. Your melee weapons equipped by those models have the Lance ability. All 3 models. Now, are you starting to see why I said bring 3 Titanics? Because you can affect all 3 of them with 1 CP stratagem. And this is why you want Canis Rex, because he can be one of the 3 Imperial Knights models, and he can make it free. The next one we're going to talk about is Vow of Retribution. When your shooting phase. Up to 3 Imperial Knights models from your army that have not been selected to shoot this phase and that are each within 9 inches horizontally of the same point on the battlefield. Effect. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by your models have the lethal hits ability. So one of them gives you lance and melee, the other one gives you lethal hits and ranged. Very good stratagems. Next one, Thunderstomp. You may recognize the name if you have played in the Index, but they have changed it significantly. It is not the same Thunderstomp that gives you dev wounds. It's 1 CP, happens in your fight phase, 1 Imperial Knights model from your army that has not been selected to fight this phase. Effect. Until the end of the phase, the attacks characteristic of any armor feat melee weapons equipped by your model is 8. The attacks characteristic of any Titanic feat melee weapons equipped by your model is 12, and improve the armor penetration characteristic of those weapons by 1. Now, I know because I've played the Valiant extensively in Questor Forge Pact, his profile is Strength 8, AP -1, 2. So now you have 12 of those Titanic feat attacks. You're hitting on 4-ups, but you have 12 attacks. And your AP is now AP -2 instead of -1. You do have the lay low, the tyrant rerolls that do work in your fight phase as well. But generally, you're going to get a little bit more than 6 hits. If you're going up against Marines, you're double. You're wounding on 2s, and you get a free reroll anyway. So if you happen to get a 1, you could reroll that. So you're going to get maybe, on average, probably 5 to 6 wounds onto a Marine. And then AP -2 puts them from a 3 up to a 5 up. So let's say you have 6 wounds. Now, a 5 up, the opponent having a 5 up save means that you're going to land 2/3 of your attacks, which means you're probably going to kill 4 Marines unless they have feel no pains because they have a enhancement or something from a detachment rule. But that's not bad. Thunderstomp is not bad. Normally, you'd be lucky to kill 1, maybe 2 Marines. It's not something I would use every battle, but situationally, you will use it a lot. Tactical foil. When your opponent's movement phase just after an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fallback move. Target 1 Imperial Knights model from your army that is within 9 inches of that unit. Effect, your model can make a normal move of up to d6 inches. In a nutshell, it's just a reactive move. Reactive moves are amazing, especially the way you're going to be playing this detachment. Next one is Full Tilt. My favorite stratagem. It's 2 CP, you take it down to 1 CP if you have Canis Rex. And when I show you the Canis Rex data sheet, you'll see what I mean, and I'll explain a little bit because I think their data sheet has already been changed from a previous FAQ that pretty much put a blanket statement over 0 CP abilities. So full tilt, when it's in your movement phase, target up to 3 Imperial Knights models from your army that have not been selected to move this phase and that are each within 9 inches horizontally of the same point on the battlefield. Effect, until the end of the phase, add 2 inches to the move characteristic of all your models and add 2 to advance rolls made for those models' units. Now remember the detachment rule. You get to reroll advance rolls. And when you do advance, your ranged weapons gain assault. So the detachment rule plus full tilt plus the reduced CP cost using Canis Rex makes this amazing detachment. Next one is rotate ion shields. It's a copy paste from the index. It's 1 CP when your opponent's shooting phase just after an enemy unit has selected its targets. Target 1 Imperial Knights unit from your army that was selected as the target of one or more of the attacking unit's attacks. Effect, until the end of the phase, models in your unit have a 4-up invulnerable save. For those of you who are new, it says until the end of the phase. So let's say somebody's firing a shadow sword at your Canis Rex. You can use rotate ion shields. And let's say the shadow sword does not kill Canis Rex because you have the 4-up invul, and they decide to fire another shadow sword at Canis Rex. You don't have to pay a CP again. You still have that 4-up invul save. Plus, remember, let's say they're firing at Canis and you have a CP. Well, he could rotate ion shields for free with his ability, and you have a CP, you can reroll the save roll. So now you're rerolling a save roll on a 4-up invul instead of a 5-up invul, so it's CP just better spent. Rotate ion shields is an amazing ability. A lot of new players, they want to spam it. Don't spam it. Generally, what somebody said in a different video that I watched is if there's VP on the line, if there's victory points on the line, use rotate ion shields or spend CP on it. If there's no victory points on the line, don't do it. I would say know your enemy, know their profile. Like I said, I would use it on a shadow sword. Yeah, it has dev wounds, but he has to roll a 6 because he doesn't have anti and dev wounds. So I would rotate against a shadow sword. High AP, very low shot count attacks. Rotating ion shields is amazing, especially if you have another CP saved up to reroll a save. It makes your knight go from being one-shottable to being extremely durable. Now we're going to move on to the second part of the video, which is the list building and which knights are good and which knights are bad for this detachment. So I have 2 sample lists here. The reason they're highlighted is because I don't know what the enhancements are going to cost because they haven't released it as of the time I'm making this video. And as you can see at the bottom, they're not 2,000 points yet. It's just an idea. Generally, I'm telling you which 3 bigs you might want to take, which enhancement you might want to take, what allies, what units, and how many points might be left. And if Evanescent Ion, the stealth enhancement, if that one gets a little cheaper, cool. You might be able to add a priest or something. So, remember Thunderstomp? It only benefits your knight if you have Titanic feet or armored feet. Generally, you wouldn't want to waste 1 CP on armored feet. That's like the Helverin feet. You wouldn't want to waste CP on that. You want to use it on a big Titanic knight. And the best one in this detachment would be the Knight Valiant. Why? Because you're getting assault, you're getting bonus advance, you're getting bonus to movement with full tilt. The Valiant has an 8-inch range. So it kind of needs that movement to hit. So here's the Knight Valiant. You can see it moves 8 inches, significantly slower than any of the other knights. In fact, it is the slowest movement profile, along with the Acastus Knights and the other Dominus Knight, the Knight Castellan. It is ridiculously slow. And now take a look at the range of his main gun, the Thunder Coil Harpoon. It has blast, devastating wounds, 12-inch range. 12-inch range? Really? You have 8-inch move and 12-inch range. That's ridiculous, right? The Knight Valiant was considered one of the worst knights. It was ranked by Auspex Tactics, another YouTuber. You should definitely follow him. He doesn't really deep dive into knights like I do, but he's always the first one to tell you about nightly news. So definitely check out Auspex Tactics. But essentially, in one of his old videos that are like a year or two old, he said that he'd give the Night Valiant a 5 out of 10 because it lost Titanic Overwatch, and the only reason you'd bring it would be to Titanic Overwatch using the conflagration cannon. 3d6 shots, 8 minus 1, 2. That's pretty damn good. Now, in Questor Forge Pack, you can Thronegeist. So Night Valiant, he had a little bit more use there. I would probably rate him a 10 out of 10 in Quest or Forge Pact. He's amazing. And again, in that detachment, he can get Assault, Advance and Shoot with one of the stratagems, Aggression Begets Aggression. But they changed his datasheet ability. In the past, after firing his weapons, he could choose an opponent that got hit, an enemy unit, and they have to take a battle shock test. For Chaos Knights, that would be amazing, but for Imperial Knights, forcing a battle shock test it's at best lame. I mean, it's really stupid ability, but at best it's kind of lame. But you take him for his conflagration cannon. That's why you took the Valiant. But they changed his main weapon, the Thunder Coil Harpoon. Originally, it was a 1 attack, ballistic skill 2 up, with anti-vehicle, anti-monster, and dev wounds, and no blast. And it had damage 12. So it was pretty reliable. If you had Laylo the Tyrant, it was very reliable. There's one shot. If you fail to hit, you're rolling a 1, and you can just re-roll that 1 hit roll, and hopefully you don't roll 2 ones, which is highly unlikely. It'll happen once in every, what, 7, 8 games? But it will happen, rolling 2 ones, but most of the time it's gonna go through, and the anti-dev wounds, it makes it very reliable into things like demons that have a 4-up invul save, or a super heavy with a tech priest next to him giving him a 4-up invul, and the strength is 24, so even if you don't get the dev wound, you're probably gonna wound most things in the game anyway. AP minus 6, unless you have an invul, you're not saving, even if you're in cover. So it used to be a good weapon. Now it's okay. The blast weapon with a 12-inch range means that after you fire it, you're going to get tagged in melee, and you can't fire blast weapons into melee, so that's a bummer. And D3 attacks, you could get 1 attack as before, but now you only have 10 damage. So it's a bummer. It's swingy, but on the other hand, you could get 3 attacks and do a maximum of 30 damage and one-shot something big. So the weapon profile itself is okay. It's not great, but his new ability, Thundershock, is amazing. In your shooting phase, each time you select a target for this model's Thunder Coil Harpoon, roll 1d6 for the target unit and 1d6 for each other enemy unit within 6 inches of the target unit. On a 4-up, the unit being rolled for is struck by arcing energies after resolving all of this model's attacks against the target unit. Each unit struck by arcing energies suffers D3 mortal wounds. Doesn't this remind you of a storm sword? This is a better storm sword. If you get within 12 inches that you can fire your Thunder Coil Harpoon, you're going to go off with a lot of damage from a lot of mortals, plus your Thunder Coil Harpoon. And not to mention, you have missiles, the Conflagration Cannon, and the Melt-A-Gun. Now, the Melt-A-Gun's 12-inch range, and the Conflagration Cannon is 18-inch range, so this is a super, super short range knight. The only thing that's long range are the missile launchers that hit across the board if you have line of sight. But this knight in particular works very well in the Valourstrike Lance detachment because of its low movement and its low range, but very, very high damage main gun that could use a lot of help from the movement and assault buffs that this detachment gives. So, next thing, I have a little list of things I want to talk about here. Canis is auto-include because the stratagems affect up to 3 knights at a time, and Canis can just make it free. Or, you can do a turn 1 full tilt. That's the one that gives +2 to movement and +2 to advance. If you bring a Canis, and that's if and only if you bring Canis. You normally cannot get 2 CP. If you go first on the first turn, you cannot use full tilt unless you have Canis that reduces its cost. And if the opponent deploys on the front line on certain maps, you can do a lot of damage. So here's Canis Rex. Let's read his ability, Legendary Freeblade. Once per turn, you can target this model with a stratagem for 0 CP and can do so even if you have already targeted a different unit with that stratagem in the same phase. Okay, slow down now. Usually, codexes are wrong, and this ability happened to be included in a blanket FAQ that happened many, many months ago. For abilities of this type that make an unnamed stratagem, any stratagem, free, and it lets you do it even if you've already targeted a different unit with that stratagem, the FAQ says that this actually just -1 to the AP cost, and you can't double a stratagem unless it's a named stratagem. Now, the Knight Lancer, it names 0 CP tank shock. So that's why the Knight Lancer gets a free tank shock. Canis does not get a free tank shock. How it works is he gets -1 to use any stratagem. Tank shock happens to be 1 CP cost, and that's why Canis makes it free. And then the Lancer can use the free tank shock, the 0 CP tank shock, and the Lancer can use it even though Canis already used it because it's named. It names specifically tank shock. So if the Lancer uses it for free first, Canis cannot use tank shock. You need to tank shock with Canis first and then tank shock with Lancer second in order to have free double tank shock. That's the combo. So Canis is an auto include because he can allow you to use the movement and advance stratagem on turn 1 if you go first. So that is literally the only reason why I include Canis is because it can affect up to 3 knights at a time, and Canis can make certain ones free, and he can make the 2 CP one usable on the first turn because he -1 to CP cost of a stratagem. So next, the stealth enhancement plus the rotate ion shield stratagem make knights a bit more durable. The Lancer does not need to rotate ion shields. He already has a 4-up invul against ranged and melee. But let's say you take the Knight Atropos, for example, or you have Canis Rex. You can use rotate ion shields to make Canis have a 4-up invul save, and you can use the stealth enhancement ability on Canis. So you can put the stealth enhancement on the Valiant, for example, and then apply it to Canis. That way, Canis can have stealth and he can have rotate ion shields available. So that stealth enhancement is amazing. Just make sure you put it on the right knight, because whichever knight you decide to put any of the enhancements, that knight can't be targeted. It has to be a different knight, which is another reason why I said bring 3 bigs. You're bringing Canis auto include. He can't take any enhancements. So if you're going to take an enhancement on one of the knights, you might as well take a third one in case Canis is out of range, for example, or he dies. So this is why for Valourstrike Lance, I very much push 3 bigs, at least 3 bigs. If you can try 4 bigs like Canis and 2 Lancers and a Gallant, maybe, I don't know. If you can fit four, but the way I play maximum 3 bigs. One of the units I really, really like for this list is RTE Breachers. What does this mean? RTE is Rogue Trader Entourage, and they can be taken with Voidsmen or Breachers. I like to bring the Breachers because you get more Breacher bodies than you get Voidsman bodies. And what the Rogue Trader Entourage does is it lets you redeploy itself. Well, you can redeploy up to D3 battle line units, of which I believe breachers are battle line. And so they can infiltrate into the midboard and spread, I believe there are 14 models across the midboard. And you can block the opponent's infiltrate. And if you leave them there and don't redeploy them, you can block their scout moves too. And if they're a melee pressure army, you could block their movement too, because they're probably not going to shoot 14 models out with a couple inferno pistols or plasma pistols or something. So you just leave the RT breachers. It's a brick wall you're putting down in the middle of the board for 195 points. They do have a medic too, so if they happen to survive, you can restore bodyguard models after the bodyguard is destroyed. If you lose one rogue trader model, for example, you can restore him using the medic as well. So the rogue trader Entourage and Breachers, it's great. You block infiltrate, you can block melee pressure armies, you get block scouts, and you get to redeploy them for free. So if you decide, hey, I'm just gonna pick them all up and throw it on the opponent's natural expansion objective, well, the one closer to them that's easily defensible, then it kind of throws a wrench in some of their scoring plans. So the RT Breachers is a great way to just be tricksy and block a lot of stuff that can turn one ruin your day. So with RTE Breachers, there's a strategy. And for those of you who are veterans, you'll know this strategy. It's called jail. The Custodes sometimes can do it. Space Wolves, the Thunderwolf jail, like they can do it. But a jail is generally infiltrate or scout units that just push all the way up. When they get turn one, they are up in your face and you can't move. Now, knights can walk over models, so knights are a lot harder to jail. But it was not a common strategy in the past for knights to be the ones jailing. But if you take Rogue Trader, Entourage, and Breachers, you're already blocking Infiltrate, you're blocking Scout, and if they're using a lot of infantry on foot, like Catachans, and they're relying on a 6-inch scout or Zodgrod with a 9-inch scout, you're blocking all that. You're blocking their movement. If they're on foot, now they have to foot slog all the way from the front of their deployment zone. So RTE breaches is a great way to just slow the enemy down. And like I said about melee pressure armies, they can't shoot 14 models off. I believe one of the breachers has a shield that gives you a 4-up invul. You kill him off first, so you can bring him back with a med pack. But they're very durable. And a bunch of pistols, like plasma pistols, infernal pistols, they're not going to kill 14 breachers in one phase of shooting, and they're gonna have to charge. And when they charge, sure, they might be able to kill the whole unit if they charge enough stuff into it and they can consolidate onto the midboard objective. But that's all your big knights not getting hit. Big knights are very expensive. They are not invincible, even with rotate ion shields and even with stealth enhancement. And remember how that enhancement works. You'd have to go first. So if the opponent goes first, none of your knights have stealth. That only kicks in after your first turn, after you use it. So your first turn, if you're deploying on the front line, you're very vulnerable unless you use RTE breachers. And when you put those breachers on the front line, it will really slow the enemy down. And this is a very fast moving detachment. Turn one, +2 to movement, +2 to advance. You're bringing some very hard, heavy hitters that hit in melee, they hit in range. You're bringing very, very heavy hitters. And why I say hitting in melee, no, generally you can't advance and shoot and charge, but you can. If you bring a Lancer, then you can make a Warglaive advance, shoot, and charge in this detachment. So if you bring two Lancers and two Warglaives, now you have a lot of board presence and a lot of early pressure. You don't want it to backfire on you by deploying on the front line and getting charged the first turn. You just jailed yourself. So Rogue Trader and Encourage, you're paying less than 1/10 of your army to prevent you from getting jailed and helping you, if you go first, to jail the enemy by literally moving the RTE breachers right up to their deployment zone. Well, unless they have a lot of flamers, don't do that, but you can prevent movement and then move the knights up aggressively behind them. And now they have your whole army on their deployment zone. And I'll show you that later. I'm so excited about it. This is such a great detachment, and it just gets so much better if you bring the right units. Next, this detachment is geared toward short-range knights with melee stratagems and enhancements. You get Thunderstomp. Thunderstomp is good for things like the Valiant and the Castellan. Me preferring the Valiant over the Castellan. But it also has that lance in melee and lethal in range, so you could bring whatever you want here. There just are certain knights that are a little bit better and certain knights that are a little bit worse and certain knights that are just shit in all armies. So, top tier, auto include or solid choice. Canis, what we talked about earlier. Valiant, what we talked about earlier. Now, what we haven't talked about is the Errant. The Errant has a 24-inch thermal melt up, and he gets bonuses to hit against the closest target. So, having the extra movement and the extra advance might be able to allow you to get your Errant and position him where he gets bonuses to hit against a target that you want to hit it with. And since it has a Melta that kicks in, bonus damage at half range, you kind of want to be up in their face. You got to be closer than 12 inches to get that Melta bonus. So this detachment is really good for an Errant. And I added the Warglaive there for what I said earlier with the Lancer combo. Mid tier, usable with good synergy with detachment rule and stratagems. So not auto include, but something that's good enough for somebody to take and win with. Knight Castellan. He's pretty slow. Maybe the movement buffs can help him position where he can get between firing lanes quickly. Next one, the Claw Moirax. That's a no-brainer. Especially with armigers, they're losing battle lines, so you can only bring maximum 3. If you want to bring a 4th armiger and you happen to have 10 points, bring a Claw Moirax. Like I said, he's mid-tier, he's not auto-include, but a Claw Moirax against certain targets actually does more damage than a Warglaive. Against other targets, he does less damage, but he's a good bonus Warglaive. Next is a Lancer. Why I put him here and not auto include is because Lancer's a particular build that you want to build into. It's not like you could take a Lancer, take all the wrong enhancements, and still win games. It's if you build a particular list to take the Lancer, so Lancer with Warglaives and Canis, double tank shock, advance and charge, it's amazing. But if you're taking the wrong units and taking the wrong armigers, you're not gonna win. So that's why I put him in mid tier. He's not auto include, but if you build a list to work around the Lancer, he's pretty much top tier. He's probably equally or better than Canis or Valiant or the Errant if you build into that. Next up is the Warden. He kind of works. He takes buffs from the stratagems. The lethal hits will help it. The lance will help. The thunderstomp won't help, but the extra movement, it'll help the warden. He's usable. The defender, same thing. He can actually use thunderstomp. The movement will help the defender. The Assault will help the defender, but in a different way. The Knight Defender uses conversion weapons, so you might want to advance him backwards to get out of short range and into the long conversion range, where he gets critical hits on 4-up. So it might help the defender. Haven't really built a list around him, but it might help to have him. A Helverin's okay if you're not bringing a Lancer. If you're bringing a Castigator, for example, or some other knight that buffs shooting, like if you're bringing the Warden, the Helverin's good, goes well with the Warden. If you're bringing a Magera, the Helverin goes well with the Magera. Atropos, his points went up. He's 405 points. He's more expensive than any of this other Cerastus knights now. I think he's pretty balanced. He's not bad. He's definitely usable. He has both ranged and melee, and he also works pretty well with Canis. Next up is the Knight Crusader with thermal. So the Knight Crusader can take the same weapon that the Errant can take, or he can take a rapid fire battle cannon that the Paladin gets. If you take him with the thermal, the Crusader, you know, he might be viable, but his points went up relatively. I think he's 395 points, I believe, which is the same cost as a Castigator, and you might as well bring a Castigator because he has a better bondsman ability, moves faster, and has melee. So I think Crusader is usable, but he's bottom mid tier. And then bottom tier, there's no synergy, it's redundant, it's better in a different detachment, or it's just bad. I'll say right off the bat, Acastus Knights, this is the wrong detachment. Yes, people think they're bad competitively, but there is one detachment, and that is the Gate Warden Lance that I will discuss in another video, where a Porphyrion might actually a big glow up, but not in this detachment. The Preceptor, he's still bad. Acheron, the Castigator is literally the Acheron, just a lot better. The Acheron is garbage. If you really want a Flamer, take a Valiant. Acheron's pretty bad. The Styrix or Styrix, some people call it Styrix, some people call it Styrix. I have no idea how it's supposed to be pronounced, but he has a Battle Shock datasheet ability, and he has a bunch of main weapons that don't do as much damage as other knights, so he's bottom tier. The Paladin, he used to be good, but he's just redundant. His bondsman gives lethal and lance, and for 1 CP, you can give lethal or lance to 3 different knights. So why would you need a paladin? He's just redundant, and he's not useless, he's just better elsewhere. And there's 2 ways to list build. Like I said, there is the Lancer and then the something else build. Now, in this list, I included Castigator. You can bring an Errant instead of a Castigator. It's fine. I just added a Castigator because I like that particular model. And he's fast. So, 2 ways to play this is the counterpunch. You bait, you throw out, let's say, an Immolator or something, or you throw out a Helverin or a Warglaive, just bait or just leave the RTE breachers out there, wait for the opponents to expose themselves, and then have a go turn. Use full tilt with Canis Rex, come out with all 3 bigs and just smash them in one turn. That's a counter punch. And the other one is the jail. If you go first, you deploy the RTE breachers as forward as possible. On your turn, you push them forward. You either move them forward, you advance them forward, then you follow up with your armigers and your bigs, and you just have a big wave come up and just sit on objectives and threat overload. So let's go to the Valourstrike Lance. I use Bluebeam to do map markups. So now we're going to go over some map studies. This is Tipping Point on Terrain Layout 4, GW. And this is the Night Jail strategy against particularly melee pressure armies, but any other army you feel confident doing it into. So first of all, you can see these green dots. These are the RTE breachers, and this is where they can be placed 9 inches away from the enemy deployment if you go first. This essentially makes a 9-inch bubble around them where no enemies can infiltrate or scout. Pretty much blocks him out of the middle of the board where you want to move your bigs. So your RTE breachers just clears out the middle and makes sure that the enemies don't get there and harm your bigs. Now, if you're going with the jail list, you deploy your bigs in the front line. You want your Valiant, because he's the slowest, you want him right there on the edge of your deployment. The Castigator, he's a lot faster. That's why I put him in the back. So the Valiant moves 8. The red one here is Canis. So the orange one, the bricks, is Valiant. The red one's Canis. And the orange dots, that one is the Castigator. He's a lot faster, so I put him in the back. This is another reason why I take a Cerastus chassis, which is a little bit faster. You could take a Lancer, you could take an Errant, but they're going to have different movement. This is just a sample of a deployment you could use to try to jail. You got your 2 armigers here, and you have half a squad of sisters back here. They are a little under 7 inches. So that's 6 inches deep strike, plus the base, which is at smallest 25 millimeters, which is an inch. So if you're under 7 inches from the edge, you screen it out. And so I just kind of string them out and then have one of the sisters towing home objective so that on your first turn, your first command phase, it's stickied. And then the immolators up here, and it's just deployed on the front line so that it can move up and take your natural expansion objective with a fairly cheap unit. Why I put the immolator up here on the first turn, if I go first, is because I want to block off the enemy from charging the sisters. So they either have to charge the immolator, fully kill it, and then consolidate, or they have to go all the way around because it's 1 inches from the edge. So if you place your immolator correctly and drop off your sisters within 3 inches, wholly within 3 inches, and you line it up properly, you can pretty much protect them with the immolator hull. If it dies, it dies. As long as your sisters don't die, it gets sticky the next turn. So we got 2 armigers down here. One of them has enough movement that if you advance 13 inches, so that's a 12-inch base move, plus a 1-inch advance, which you can always re-roll, but you only need 13 to get out here. And if you have a Helverin or something long range, you can hit into their deployment zone. You can also cover the top here, and you can also fire into the bottom, so you have a lot of firing angles from here. And one of the reasons why I like to bring a Castigator is because you can apply the Bondsman ability to your Armiger, and the Bondsman ability is sustain hits 1 and -1 AP. So if you give it to a Helverin or a Moirax, now you have something that's very viable in Overwatch. You have high shot volume, and for every 6 you roll, because of the sustained, you get an extra hit, and the bonus AP helps you against targets that have really good saves. Another armiger I put all the way at the bottom here, and this line here is 12 inches. You could see that the Castigator can bond any of the 2 armigers. And the armiger at the bottom here moves out, and if he can make a 15 1/4, so a 16-inch on your advance roll, you can actually tow that objective right there. And you can first turn, if you get good rolls, you can have all 3 objectives on the first turn. Your big knights can tile the mid board, and you move up all your RTE breachers. If you go first, you move them up all the way here unless they have flamers. If they have flamers, you can still move them up and just risk it. But they're here to clear out the middle so your big knights can move here. And as you can see, with a basic move of 6, they can clear the middle where your knights are going to land. So the Valiant can hit somewhat into the deployment zone with a 12-inch Thunder Coil harpoon. So from here, A Valiant moves 15 inches and then he can hit up to here. If you hit any unit with that, now you have arcing mortals to everything that is within 6 inches. So let's say you decide to shoot, I don't know, right here, 12 inches right there. If you hit a unit, then everything else around it has to roll for mortals. Well, you roll for mortals against them. But that is a lot of damage that you could be spiking on the first turn if you get a good advance roll. Your minimum move becomes 13 inches. Your average is 15 and a half. So it's either 15 or 16. So I just chose 15, which is it's the lower side of the average. And it's reasonable. You get to re-roll the charge. So if you roll a 1 inch on your advance, well, not re-roll your charge, I meant re-roll your advance roll. So if you do get 1 inch, you can also re-roll that, and maybe hopefully you don't roll two ones. But if you roll decently, you can get pretty far, and you can do mortals well into their deployment zone. So why I said you want to do this against melee pressure armies is because Space Wolves and other such armies, world eaters, they will typically try to deploy very close to the front. So if you can have a small little angle against one unit, now you're just exploding mortals everywhere. So the Valiant is amazing in this detachment. The Castigator can move anywhere. I chose to put him here just to show you that with his 36-inch range, he can hit all the way to the back of their deployment zone using this angle. He can hit anywhere along here, actually. You can also move him down here and fire at anything that's exposed down here. Canis Rex, he moves somewhere into the middle. It doesn't matter really where he goes. He has a 24-inch range, and he can pretty much hit into the front of the deployment zone as well, even if he's behind the Valiant because he has more range. You see this line right here? Remember that restriction about being 9 inches horizontally away? You can see how this line here touches all three of the knights. So all of them get affected by full tilt or any of the other stratagems that have that restriction. And the way I place them, if you were to draw a 9-inch line here, they would all be on that line. So in case you wanted bonuses to shooting or bonuses to melee attacks, they would also be able to get it for free or for 1 CP the turn afterwards. And this is the formation. Now you see Canis is right in the middle. You have an Armiger here, you have the Valiant here. You can also, if you wanted lethal hits on the Helverin, for example, the Castigator next turn can bond that Helverin, and Canis can use the lethal hit stratagem on the Valiant himself and on the Helverin, making it free. And this is why Canis is auto include. I don't know if that's rules as written and whether they're going to change it in an FAQ or a Codex update. Usually they have mistakes and they will release updates for it, but as of now, I believe that's how it's played. The immolator goes here. Remember the deed where you have to hold more objectives than the opponent and it scores at the end of the opponent's turn? The way I place the sisters here, unless they dedicate a lot, that's your objective, and it's going to be sticky next turn. They'd have to send a unit from their deployment all the way to the immolator, kill the immolator, and then they'd have to consolidate onto the objective. And at this point, it looks like I have 6 to 8 OC there. So they would have to put more than 6 or 8 OC on the objective in order to take it from me. So is it possible? Absolutely. Is it likely? Probably not. Because the ruin is here and the immolator's here, the sisters can also not get shot unless the opponent is guard and they have a ton of mortars. Then you could probably clear the sisters off the objective. So if they're playing guard and they have a ton of mortars and they have a couple Lehman Russes here to kill the immolator, definitely possible to take this objective away, but they're going to have to dedicate a lot of units into clearing me off this natural expansion objective instead of killing the RTE breachers so that they can actually get out and do something, or putting damage into my knights. Because this is a tank. The Immolator has toughness 10, 3 up save with a 6 up invul. So they have to put quite a lot. Heavy bolters are not going to cut it. Auto cannons are not going to cut it unless they put a lot into it. They're going to have to put straight up last cannons or something strong, something maybe anti-vehicle into it. So this is a very tough combo that I have up top here. At the bottom, there's an armiger on the other side, which means from here in their deployment zone, they can't shoot me. They'd have to get an angle here in this blue ruin or above the ruin. They'd have to come out quite a ways to shoot that armiger off the objective. The armiger, it was nerfed a little bit because they bracket now, but he still has 6 OC. So they're just going to have to try to sneak more OC on the other side of the objective. And now, even if they're hoeing any part of this ruin, I can overwatch them. So this is a pretty strong formation, what I have right here. If they put out something big anti-tank right here above the blue ruin, my knights have enough movement to be in range to counterpunch that. So this is how you jail with using knights. It's the foundation is the detachment rule, the stratagem, full tilt, as well as using rogue trader, entourage, and breachers to kind of solidify your midboard presence. And also, from what you can see here, I have 20 objective and 2 hulls nearly covering the entire middle objective. They have to either kill the knight or they have to battle shock both knights. There's no way they can get more than 20 OC onto the objective physically. So this middle objective is mine. The top objective is most likely mine. The bottom objective is probably the easiest one to steal, but even if they do steal, look, I have sisters holding the bottom, my home objective. I have the immolator up top. I have the 2 knights in the middle. I scored my deed. I get 2 free CP, or 3 if I randomly rolled into the second Reclaim the Realm deed. But if I manually choose it, I can get 2 CP turn 1. And this is how. You have 20 OC on the mid board. Most armies are not going to be able to take this off, especially melee pressure armies that have just been jailed by another unit. Most likely, like World Eaters and Space Wolves, they're not known to have terribly good Overwatch either. So they're getting jailed. Now, if you're playing against double Shadow Swords, let's say they have one right here and they have one right here, you're not going to try to jail 2 Shadow Swords. Like I said, if they got guard with mortars, you're not going to be playing this. And this is why we move on to the second slide. Against range enemies, you want to be a little bit more cagey and you want to play a little bit more counterpunch. So you deploy almost exactly the same way. The only difference between this one and this one is that instead of deploying straight on the front with your Valiant, you are fully behind the ruin, which means they can't shoot you. Canis is further back here. It's going to be hard to get an angle on Canis using a ranged army. They might have to come all the way up here or into this top ruin here. And the only knight that I have exposed is a castigator. And he's only partially visible, so he's going to have cover even on the first turn. I still deploy the RTE breachers here. You can redeploy them if you want. But the castigator's exposed. He does have benefit of a cover. And remember, you can rotate ion shields. So if somebody has a big shadow sword right here and they want to shoot at your castigator, let him shoot. Rotate those ion shields. You might die, you might survive. It's very hard to get angles from here. The biggest angle that you can hit from is the middle here. And as you can see, if I move that 15 inches on the Valiant, I can hit even a Rogel Dorn that's barely peeking, and I can hit a medium tank like a Hellhound that's barely peeking. I got that much range. If I deploy Canis back here and he moves 16 inches, a Questoris, the minimum move is 15 inches, average move 17 and a half. If he moves a reasonable advance roll that gets him up to 16 inches with a 24-inch big profile on his last cutter, he can hit all the way back here. You got a Castigator here, and he's the fastest one. The minimum move is 17 inches, and this is with full tilt, the turn one full tilt. And his average move is 19.5. 18 is very reasonable. He can move all the way here and have a line of sight between this ruin and that ruin all the way back into this deployment zone. Anything on this line is getting hit. From this deployment, you can also move the Castigator up and hit something right here. Well, in the middle of their deployment zone, right here. You deploy the two armigers in a very similar way, but you could see the difference here. The armiger's a little bit more up here, up towards the top side. It's touching the ruin, which means he can get hit from the middle. He can get hit from here, that middle firing lane. Here, he's completely behind the ruin. He cannot be hit. This bottom armiger is pretty well hidden too, and he's right up there on the front of the deployment. That way, if he rolls a 16, he can get onto objective. The Castigator can barely tow the objective with an 18-inch. And you have 6 plus 10 OC right there. You have 16 OC. Good luck trying to get these guys off. The Valiant here, you don't have to put Canis here. If you roll high, you can pivot him and put him right behind the Valiant. Get that 20 OC on that midboard objective. Immolator, you can move up and do the same thing, but if it's guard, you might not want to drop off your sisters and do tricks like that. You move the Immolator down through here. This is a gap in the ruin, and you can drive over the blue ones. So you drive all the way out here, and you can see into here. And the Hunter Killer Missile it hits on 2-ups, and it has a 48-inch range. So if you move the Immolator up here or up here, then you can fire the Hunter Killer and strip cover off of quite a lot of things. So the Immolator moves 12. He only needs 10 inches to clear and get out here. He can move a little bit forward or backwards depending to get a little bit better angles. So he hits anything with the Hunter Killer, it strips cover. So this is your first turn, even playing cagey. You let him come out. You let him shoot at that Castigator, or maybe you leave the RTE Breacher somewhere. Let him shoot at the RTE Breachers. Let him shoot. When they expose themselves, even if it's a tiny little corner, you get a reasonable or a good advance roll, you could start damaging things like crazy. So most armies will leave stuff on home objective. If you manage to hit the corner of that Dorn, 6 inches around the Dorn, every single unit within 6 inches might be able to take mortal damage, including that medium right there. It's a Chimera or a Hellhound. He's within 6 inches of the Dorn. So if the Dorn gets hit with the Thundercoil Harpoon, everything 6 inches away from it is at risk of taking mortal wounds. That's very powerful. Plus, the main gun's probably going to destroy the Dorn in one shot anyway. I mean, if it's a Dorn commander. If the opponent blanks it, you have your 2 twin-linked Melta guns that you could fire at it too. It's pretty dead. And from here, the Valiant alone can hit both tanks, but you want redundancy in case you roll so badly, in case you roll double ones. Like I said before, things like that can happen. You want redundancy, so you want Canis Rex somewhere around the Valiant so that he can add a little bit of firepower. You fire with the Valiant, doesn't quite do the job, Canis finishes it off. Good to finish units. Why? Because dead units don't fire back at you. Bracketed units fire back at you. And the Castigator, he can go anywhere. If he rolls good enough, he can go all the way up here. He can go right here to the middle. He can be on the objective. You can have all 3 knights on the objective if you move properly. Or he can come down here and link up with this Armiger and be close enough to bond it the next turn. You're going to be doing a lot of range damage. And the cool thing is that the Castigator also has a melee option. So if he happens to get touched in melee, he can fight back. So this is a more cagey deployment. Things are a little bit more inside ruins. So next one is Search and Destroy. And this is a different deployment style, but the idea is the same. This one's a night jail. You put all your knights up here. You block off the middle with RTE breachers. This one's a little bit more tricky because this is a 8-inch move. You have to advance your RTE breachers all the way. You have to roll at least a 2 for them to clear where your knights are going to want to land. Now, not necessarily, though, because let's say the opponent deploys right on the front line. You don't have to be this far up. You know, you could stay a little bit further back and still hit with that 12-inch thunder coil range. So it depends where they deploy, but let's say they're deploying all the way back near this ruin. You are able to hit most things with the Valiant and a 15-inch move. A 15-inch move meaning that full tilt with the +2 to move and the advance and the rerolls to advance and the +2 to advance. 15 is quite reasonable. And he's going to be right here and he's going to be able to hit all the way up to here. So a lot of people like to put things on their home objective in deployment to try to sticky it or something. So if there's any unit here that he can touch, it's 6 inches away from that unit's footprint. It's very, very powerful. And here you could see that Canis can go here and the castigator can move up here. From here, he has 31 inches to the end of the wall. He can fire all the way back here. An armiger with a reasonable 14-inch move. And remember, it's a detachment rule. You don't have to spend any CP just to do a normal advance and get assault. So that's a 2-inch advance, quite reasonable. You get the rerolls to advance with your detachment rule. So you roll a 1, well, guess what? You reroll it. Most likely, you'll get a 2 or higher. And this is a Moirax with a 24-inch range. You can hit all the way up here. So this is a kill zone right here, meaning that any enemy who deploys right here is instantly dead because you're going to be hitting it with a Moirax. You can hit it with a Castigator. If you deploy correctly, you might be able to hit it with other units as well if you deploy correctly or get better advance rolls. But this is a kill zone. The 24-inch, that's a Graviton Pulsar, I think. And where you're starting this Moirax, the Castigator can bond it on the first turn. So it's got the sustain, it's got the bonus AP, it's got anti-vehicle 2 up. Whatever's here, whether it's in it also has blast. So blast and sustain is really good against infantry and chaff and swarms. And it also has anti-vehicle too, so it could put some hurt into some light or medium vehicles as well. The Castigator, his bolt cannon is strength 6, but he gets twin linked. So anything that's toughness 11 or less, he's rerolling all his wounds. It's pretty reliable to wound. He has a -2 AP. It's reasonable. The Immolator, I started up here, and I think there's really no way unless I start the Immolator here maybe, there's really no way I can get an Immolator to hit here to strip cover. So instead of trying to go somewhere to strip cover, I'm just going to push him up here. And if you position the Immolator right, then you could put your sisters here behind the ruin so they can't be shot at other than with indirect fire weapons or unless the enemy comes out here, which they can't because you're already here. So well, maybe they can go all the way up here, but it's hard to get angles if you put the sisters here. You also have an immolator, so you got to kill the immolator and the sisters to take this objective off. Most likely, they're not going to be able to do that and also deal with the RTE breachers and the knights and the armiger here that's towing the objective. So that deed of holding more objectives than the opponent, it's actually pretty damn easy in this detachment if you're going to jail. If you're going to counterpunch, you might have to keep it and, wait a whole turn to try to pull it off. But, on your go turn, you could definitely pull it off easily. And like I said, if somebody's playing double shadow swords, you don't want to deploy on the front line because you could lose a knight. You can rotate ion shields, but turn 1, you want to stay a little bit hidden. You don't want to expose everything if they're running double shadow swords. If they spike with one of them and end up killing your knight, and they fire the second shadow sword and they spike with that one too, you could lose 2 knights and it's game over for you. So you want to play cagey, and just like the previous example, you want to just put them a couple inches back so that they're right behind the ruin, and they either can't be shot or it requires some kind of crazy angles to shoot you, whereafter you can charge out your knights and start blasting and doing damage. So if you're playing against something that has really strong range damage and you're scared that they might go first, don't deploy on the front line. If you're playing against a more melee oriented army, this is pretty safe against most armies, you know, with the exception being opponents that are knights. If you see two Knight Castellans, don't deploy like this. They have anti-Titanic dev wounds on their missiles. You got two Knight Castellans. You have anything with Volcano in its name, go KG. You know, if you see three Hammerheads and three what are they called? Not Wave Serpents. The Hammerheads and the ones with the rocket launchers. Don't deploy on the front line. Play KG. You know, if they got three Doomsday Arcs, play KG. But if they got Tyranids with the Termagant spam, yeah, deploy on the front line. If they got Foot Guard, maybe they got a Rogaldorn commander and a couple Lehman Russ Vanquisher, I would still deploy on the front line. Lehman Russ Vanquishers, they're so unreliable. You have Rotate Ion Shields, they're going to drop half their shot, and they only get one shot with their main gun, so I would say deploy on the front line, even if you're going against a guard with a couple tanks, you know? Any Horde Army, World Eaters, Space Wolves, Blood Angels, doesn't matter. If it's a Horde Army or a melee focused army, drop the breachers right in the middle and get ready to pound them to dust. But anyway, guys, we've gone through all the detachment rules, we've gone through the stratagems, we've gone through the enhancements, and we've done some map studying. We gave you some knight recommendations, some ally recommendations, some combos. So hopefully you learned something from this video, and hopefully I helped you visualize how much movement these knights can actually get in Valourstrike lands. I appreciate you guys watching. Drop a like, subscribe if you want to watch more of these videos. All right, have a good day, and always praise the machine god.